Hello, my name is Brex10, and welcome to my Monster Hunter Rise plus Sunbreak Large Monsters tier list. I mentioned in a previous video that I was going to, I had more in the script for that video, but was going to make it a separate video. Basically, that was just me listing off all of the monsters and sharing some of my thoughts on them, but I realized fairly recently that I could just make a tier list, and that would be a lot simpler. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It'd be a lot simpler. It's a thing that is done on on YouTube. There's visuals for it. It can maybe be practiced for editing because I'm not just going to have the pictures on my screen of the monsters, but I'm going to maybe try and get those pictures put in my editing. That's something I've never done before, and I'm not sure if I'm going to commit to that, but here's hoping. But even if I don't, at least you'll have something to look at. Yeah. I was looking for a tier list that already had all of the monsters in it, and this one had two more than the other tier list I looked at, but I don't know what was missing from that list, so I'm just gonna take its word for it. Actually, it looks like there might be something missing from this list, because I'm not seeing a certain monster. Okay, I found a list that seems to actually have all of the monsters this time. It has, I think, 3 more than the other list did, so I don't know what all was missing, but we can get started now. We'll start from the start. Aknosom, fantastic monster, fun fight, pretty decent low-tier monster, though. It's based on that Umbrella Yokai, which is always cool. A lot of, every monster that was new to Sunbreak was mildly based on a yokai, which, as I said in the other video as well, I was really hoping we would get Tetsukabra, because he's an Oni, but still. I mean, it's not really anything special. It's just kind of a cool, frilly crane that's got a decent fight. I would put this in, I want to say B tier, but I'm actually going to put it in C tier and add a tier. F tier, which will be for monsters I actually dislike, which there won't be very many things in. Okay, I wanted to put him in B tier, but I actually added a tier and put him in C. He is a high C, though. He's a pretty decent monster. He's fun. He's just not really anything special. Next is Almudron. Almudron is a really cool monster. His fight is pretty fun, and he looks great. Mud monsters are, I mean, it's not an aesthetic for the fight that's really all that fun, but it's not necessarily bad. I mean, one of my favorite monsters is Barroth, so yes. I'm going to put Almudron in a B tier. I can't really think of anything about Almudron I dislike, so, and it is a really cool monster. It's a Leviathan, which is an awesome skeleton. Pretty much every Leviathan is good. I can't think of any that aren't. Yeah, solid B, but like maybe a high-ish B. And I actually added another segment, SS, and this is going to be for like some of my favorite monsters in the entire series, which some of them are in this game. Next up is Anjanath. I've never been a huge fan of Anjanath. He's grown on me a little bit over time as I started to notice his like less generic T-Rexy stuff, more like his vulture aesthetic and his nose bone and his wings, but like all of the cool stuff about him is stuff that is like only active for parts of his fight, and other than that, he is just kind of a big T-Rex that breathes fire, which is kind of boring in relativity to everything else that is in the series. So, yes. Now, I've placed all of the Apex monsters, went ahead and did that. They're all kind of like, I didn't hate them, they were decent fights, but they felt kind of pointless. They were just the Deviants, I think it was, from Generations, but like without any of the cool stuff about the Deviants other than a couple of their moves. They just seem kind of pointless. I mean, they look a little bit cool, they're okay fights, but they're just harder versions of themselves. They don't have unique armor sets, they don't have unique weapons. I mean, I guess you could count the Rampage weapon, but there's not much to say about them. I put Zinogre a little bit higher because I did really enjoy Apex Zinogre as a fight, but again, it is just kind of Thunderlord, so yeah. Next is Arzuros. Now, this might seem unfair putting him here. I would say I kind of want to put him next to Aknosom, but higher. Arzuros was one of the first monsters I ever fought in this series because 3 Ultimate was my first Monster Hunter game, and he's one of the first monsters you fight in that game. So, of course, there's probably a little bit of nostalgic bias here. I have always liked Arzuros. I've always thought he looked really cool. Bears are fun monsters. There's a big blue bear that just wants to eat honey. His gear has always looked cool. He's a very low-tier monster, but he's always fun to have. So, I almost want to put him in B tier. He's a low B. Just know that. He is a low B. Next up is Astalos. Astalos has always been a great monster. There's not really much to say about that. His gear looks awesome, is awesome. His weapons are all awesome. He is awesome, and his fight. He's just a very well done and fun monster that might even move up later on as this list goes. Aurora Somnacanth. It's just Somnacanth, but if you took the things that made Somnacanth interesting away. Of course, the monster still looks cool, but being a new version of a monster that I think is better in its default version, I'm going to have to put it in D tier. I'm going to have to put it in D tier. I don't really think they should have bothered. You could do a Somnacanth different version, but I feel like you can't really take away the sleep aspect of Somnacanth. So yeah, it's just Somnacanth but worse, in my opinion. Barioth. Barioth has always been my favorite of the main trio of pseudo-wyverns. Of course, Giganox ranks even higher for me a little bit, but of that main trio, Barioth has always been my favorite. I almost want to put him in S tier, but I'm going to put him in A tier for now. Barroth. Barroth is the first monster I had ever farmed for his armor and weapons in any Monster Hunter game ever. He is one of my favorite, lower mid-tier monsters, and I'm going to have to put him in S, but that is highly biased. Of course, this is an opinion list. This isn't an objective what's better thing. I've always liked Barroth's fight. I've always liked his gear. I've always liked the way he looks, and I'm glad he has been represented in the games as we've gotten more and more of them. Basarios is cool, but he is just kind of smaller Gravios because he is just a baby Gravios. He's a decent monster. I've always enjoyed fighting him, except for when, I didn't have enough sharpness to fight him, because that's always annoying. But he is just kind of a rock that shoots lasers, and not much else. If Gravios was on this list, he'd be an A, but Basarios is a B. B for Basarios. Bazelgeuse! So in World, it's interesting. I never really cared about Bazelgeuse until we got Seething Bazelgeuse, who I thought was just absolutely fantastic. I super enjoyed Seething Bazelgeuse, but Bazelgeuse himself, I never really cared for anything past, the memes. Seeing the other things on this list, I'm gonna have to move some stuff, actually. I'm gonna go ahead and put Basarios and Apex Zinogre here, and him there, but know that he is a low B. Bishaten. An awesome monkey monster that throws fruits. It's awesome. It's a fun fight. It's a cool idea. I don't know why the pine cones are explosive, but I'm not going to complain. Oh, wait, no, that's a different monster. Still, the persimmons and stuff, it's just a fun, low-tier fight. I prefer over Aknosom, personally. Bloodhorns Bishaten. It's just Bishaten, but with explosive acorns instead of fruit. Again, I feel like it would have been cool if he got both explosive acorns and fruit, but he would occasionally do a fruit move or something. I feel like you lost that a little bit, but it isn't like you only lost things. This time there was actually a trade-off for something I think is an almost equally interesting gimmick. I almost think I prefer Blood Orange, but the fruit idea, especially of him spewing them out when you knock him down and you being able to pick them up and use them against him, that is a really fun mechanic in the fight that I really enjoy. So I'm going to have to put these two on the same tier. Chameleos. Of the 3, In the older games, it was my favorite. Of the three, between Chameleos, Kushala, and Teostra, it was always my favorite in every aspect. I think with Kushala's recent rework, I prefer Kushala, but I'm going to have to say a B. It's a high B. Valstrax in S tier. It's an awesome jet dragon that has, like, a lot of control over its wings and the ways it can orient them and use them, and it stabs things with them and shoots jets at you. It's just an awesome idea that works fantastically. Who doesn't love Valstrax? It's a great monster. Of course it's an S tier. Both of the crabs in S tier, because obviously crabs are awesome. I've always liked these monsters, but with Sunbreak especially, the way they have been reworked for the new world, they are just absolutely awesome monsters. I love fighting. I've never really cared too much for Bleed, so Shogun gets a little bit of points off for that, but I still love both of these monsters. They're fun fights, they have cool gear. I can never complain about them. Diablos. I'm conflicted on Diablos, because in some ways I really like Diablos, and in some ways I just find him uninteresting. I prefer Monoblos. I will say that. I prefer Monoblos. Remember, this tier list, B, I still really like the monster. It just doesn't stand out to me too much. So, yeah, B. So Sunbreak was my personal first experience with Espinas as the representative of Frontier. And I really like the monster. I didn't think I would. A combination of being on fire, poisoned, and paralyzed sounds like it would be just annoying and infuriating, but I really like the monster. I think it's really cool how it's designed after rose thorns. It's interesting how it sleeps at the start of the fight, and you can hit it a few times without it waking up. And I also love the implications this monster has, because there are a lot of Frontier monsters that are awesome and that I would love to see. And that he is in this game at all means there's a chance they will be in the game. So there also is points there. His gear looks awesome. He has some awesome skills on it. I can't really think of anything I don't like about Espinas, which is weird, again, because I felt like I was going to hate Espinas' fight because of, like, all of the statuses he applies, but it's just not annoying in his case for some reason. I don't even know exactly what black magic they performed to make this monster work in a way that it isn't infuriating despite, what it is, but I just really like Espinas. It's pretty high up there for me. Furious Rajang. It's a cool monster. It's the better of the gorillas. I've never really liked the gorilla monsters in this game. I like a lot of the monkey monsters, but the gorilla monsters themselves, I've just never really enjoyed their fight. I just feel like their moveset is limited by their shape in a way that just makes them not quite fun. I especially didn't like them in World, but they're a little bit better in Rise. Furious Rajang in Rise is a lot better than he was in World, because he has more of his moves back. He's a fun fight. He's decent. He's not bad. I enjoy him, but I've never been a huge fan of the Rajangs. Furious is, of course, better than normal Rajang, though. Gaismogorm in A tier. I want to put him in S tier. I'm going to put him in S tier. But it's a low S tier because the fight itself, I really love the design of the monster, and I really like a lot of its moves. I love the cinematicness of it. It's just something about actively being in the fight is underwhelming to me, and I don't exactly know why. In a previous video, I said he was a little bit too easy, but I feel like that's not all there is to it. Not exactly sure myself. He's still a fantastic monster, but I feel like he's held back by something. Maybe he'll go up if we ever get a harder version. Maybe it is just the difficulty that's making me feel this way, but as far as I know, yeah, I'm going to have to say S tier. I like how I'm debating, why am I putting him this low? Again, I was about to put him in only A tier, but again, still, A tier isn't low. A tier is, this is a great monster. I had to make a new tier because I knew I needed to put Garangolm above all of these other monsters because I absolutely love Garangolm. But also I knew there was going to be some monsters in this that were going to go above even Garangolm. So, Garangolm is the first SS tier monster. I love his fight. I love his gear. I love his weapons. I love everything about him. His aesthetic is great. The way he patches himself up with different pieces of stone and other things throughout the fight is awesome. His Wyvern Ride is fun. He's my favorite of the three lords, and that's pretty much all I can really say about that, I think. I know I was just saying I'm not a huge fan of the gorilla monsters, and he has the same skeleton as them. Maybe it's just his size that makes it work more than it does in their case. It might be that. It just makes his moveset and the, like, moving between his attacks and stuff more interesting and fun for me than any of the other smaller gorillas were. I really like Garangolm. He's an awesome monster, and I am so glad we got him in Sunbreak. I actually think he was my favorite monster that was, like, newly added with Sunbreak, not a returning monster. So, yes. Gold Rathian. I've always liked the Rathians greater than the Rathaloses, and Gold Rathian is one of the better Rathians. But actually, in Sunbreak, I feel like Gold Rathian drops down a little bit. I don't exactly know what it is. Its moveset is just a little bit different. I preferred Gold Rathian in World over Gold Rathian in Sunbreak. Now, I still really like Gold Rathian. Of course, it's a fun fight. It really is. And it's Old Faithful Rathian. It's just not quite as fun as it was in World for some reason. Maybe it's just another difficulty thing. It was an absolute, like, heart-pumping challenge in World for me that took me a few times to beat the first time. Next up is Gore Magala, who I will put in triple S tier. He's one of my favorite monsters. Actually, he is in contention for my favorite monster in the entire series, alongside Gammoth and Duramboros. I really love Duramboros. Its aesthetic is awesome. Its gear is awesome. Its moveset is absolutely hilarious and fun, and it is one of my favorite monsters in the entire series. Gore Magala is super edgy. I love that aesthetic. Its fight is super cool. The Frenzy Virus added so much to the story of Monster Hunter 4. I mean, it was the story of Monster Hunter 4, and it was a really good one, too. I can't think of anything about Gore Magala I dislike. Even the Frenzy Virus in the fight, it's a thing that is like a double-edged sword. If you get hit with it and you're good enough, it can become a good thing, or it can be a detriment. But it's not like Bleed, where it's an annoying detriment. It's just you are worse, and that's going to be a problem. Yeah, it's always been an awesome fight. It's always been an awesome aesthetic. Its gear looks great, especially its weapons. Gore Magala weapons are some of my favorite-looking weapons. It actually, quite possibly my favorite-looking weapons in the entire series. I don't think there's any single monster where its weapon for every single class is one of my favorite weapons in that class. There's a lot of monsters who have weapons that are like, oh, that weapon is one of my favorites in that class. Some of their other weapons don't look that great, though. Gore Magala is the only one I can think of where every single weapon from this monster is gorgeous. There's not really much more I need to say about that. It is a fantastic monster with a fantastic fight and fantastic gear, and it has been one of my favorites for the longest time. And usually, if someone asks me, what is your favorite monster? He is what I answer. He is not necessarily first place. He's kind of tied for first place, but he stands out a little bit more. I think because he was maybe my first favorite, despite the fact that I've been fighting Duramboros for much longer. Goss Harag. I am so glad to see the bear class of monster get a higher tier, more difficult fight. And the way they did it is fantastic. The way he forms blades of ice throughout the fight is awesome. I love the way he uses it. And one thing I do want to mention is people were talking about how, oh, we wanted him to get a subspecies or variant of some type in Sunbreak. And some people have been saying a few different ideas, but all of the ideas I've seen have been swapping out the ice for something else, or just going further into the ice altogether. And I actually am kind of in the middle ground for that. We can have monsters with multiple statuses or ailments or elements. And what I think would be a really cool subspecies for a Goss Harag is a Mjolnir Goss Harag, or some other name. Basically, it would be a Goss Harag with the ice blades like we know him, but it would also do ice hammers, and it also has lightning moves. You can maybe give it the lightning beam, kind of like what Rajang has, but also every single hit from the icy blades, they're also covered in lightning. You get Ice Blight and Thunder Blight. It's a really cool idea. It would really, like, kind of lean into his somewhat Nordic aesthetic, despite the fact that he's based on a yokai. And I think it would just be a really fun fight and aesthetic. I would say go for Blue Lightning, not Yellow Lightning, because otherwise he would kind of be stepping a little bit on Rajang's territory. And I feel like the Blue Lightning on the ice would look a little bit better and would have a fun, like, interaction with his color scheme, because of course you change the monster's base color scheme. I don't actually have many ideas for how the monster would end up looking. You could even make the ice, instead of the white ice that you see him using as his blades, the white blue ice, you could go for black ice, where it's like dark, deep ice that is clear and solid, and have that also covered in the blue lightning, or maybe have it just straight up glowing with the lightning energy. That would be a really cool idea. A Mjolnir Goss Harag, I think, would be a fantastic, awesome monster, and just a great way of adding to what Goss Harag already is to make it an even more awesome fight. Great Baggy is in C tier. It's just kind of a blue raptor that shoots ice balls. Great Izuchi is in A tier. I really like the bladed tail and the moveset and the way it, like, does team attacks with its other Izuchis. It's probably my favorite monster of that skeleton right now. Followed up by Great Ragi, of course, who is a super fun monster with super awesome gear. Speaking of gear, Great Izuchi, his hunting horn is like a pinwheel, like those little toys you always see in people's gardens and stuff, but it's like a bladed one that spins. It's like a four-bladed saw hunting horn. It's a really cool aesthetic, and it moves while you have it pulled out. It's just a fun hunting horn, and all of his other weapons look great too. Izuchi, his gear isn't that great, but he himself, his fight, and his weapons are all pretty cool, especially for such a low-tier monster. Great Ragi, again, it's the better of the main three Gis that exist. Jaggy, Baggy, Ragi. I've always loved its gear. It's like a super cowboy aesthetic. The hammer is a gun. Actually, wait, no, that's a different hammer. The hammer is like a boot poker thing. I don't remember what those are called. The dual blades are just bladed guns, which is cool. It's got a bunch of good looking gear. It's the armor for Great Ragi is what made me realize I like Evade Extender in Rise a lot, to the point where I have it on every single build I make. Yeah, Great Ragi is one of the better lower tier monsters alongside Great Izuchi. And before we move on, I would like to mention Great Boggy would be an awesome monster if he existed, but we don't have one, sadly. Mudfish. I've never liked Mudfish. I'm not even going to bother to try to remember its name. I've never liked Mudfish. It's just kind of a... It's a fight that exists. It's just kind of... It's a thing that takes up time. Its armor looks cool, but that's like the only good thing I can really say about it. It has a fun turf war with Barroth. I've just never cared much about any of the Piscine Wyverns. They're all either annoying or just boring. The only real exception being Jyuratodus, who is actually a good monster. I would put Jyuratodus up in A, but Mudfish is just kind of time spent every time I'm fighting him. I don't really care about Mudfish. Khezu. We've already talked about this. I don't need to talk about it anymore. I hate Khezu. I despise him. He goes in F tier. Kulu-Ya-Ku, I do prefer him over Boggy. I love the just tenacious attitude he has, especially in World, where he will go up to monsters way beyond his like tier and donk them with stones and stuff. It's just the personality of this monster that they show off in world made me love him. The fight's okay. It is just kind of a low tier raptor. The gear and weapons aren't really anything special, but I've always just really loved the monster itself for the personality they gave it in the games. Kushala in A tier. This is absolutely surprising. In any other game, this would have been a C or D tier, probably a D tier. But Kushala got a rework in Rise, and I actually really enjoy him. I've always preferred his the idea and aesthetic and gear of him over the other main 3 Elder Dragons, but I've always found his fight really annoying. I've always found all of their fights really annoying, the least annoying one being Chameleos. But now Kushala with a much better fight is the best of the 3 for me. I love his gear. I love his weapons. I love the way he looks. I love the idea of him. And his fight now is fun too. It's an A tier monster for me, and I am so glad that he got the rework he got. Legambi, I'm putting right next to Arzuros for the same reasons. It's a fun bunny bear monster that slides around on its belly and makes giant snowballs. Now, I do kind of miss in the older games where when you got hit with ice attacks, you became a snowball. And you had to like just walk around. It was a little annoying because it would like just take away your ability to fight, but it made sense. You're caked up in snow, and it was fun, and it was not really something that was on a lot of like higher tier, more difficult monsters that I can think of right now. So it's not like it was an annoying thing. It was just a fun little gimmick on some of the ice monsters that I really enjoyed. So yeah, he's still fun, but he's got a little bit less charm than he did because of the lack of that snowballing you thing. In the older games, he was usually the first monster who would ever do that to you, and it was always like, it was just such a fun thing to like see and have happen the first time it happened. Next up is Lucent Nargacuga. Like I said, I've always preferred Barioth over the other pseudo-wyverns, but Lucent Nargacuga is a really fun Nargacuga fight. With the way it goes invisible and uses poison spikes attacks, and of course it had a unique arena that is less unique now. You fight other things on the arena now, but it's still a really cool arena. Lucent Nargacuga is going to go in A tier for me. Lunagaron. Basically take all the good things about Odogaron and add a bunch of other good things. I've always thought werewolves are awesome. I'm actually going to put him in S tier. He is a fantastic monster. I almost want to put him up with Garangolm. I'm going to say a really high S tier. I'm going to reorganize this list a little bit. Yeah, Lunagaron is a fantastic monster. It's a werewolf. I am almost certain it grows in size when it enrages and stands on 2 legs, but it might just be a bit of an optic illusion going on. I swear he grows in size. He doesn't just grow spikes on his back. But the way his moveset works, with him being a 4-legged wolf at half the fight and a 2-legged clawed hands wolfman another half of the fight, it is a super fun, awesome aesthetic. I loved the ice bladed weapons. I actually think that's something that Sunbreak brought to ice monsters that has never really been a thing in the previous games. Of course, Velkhana kind of had that going. Frostfang Barioth kind of had that going. But ice has always been an element that was a little bit... It's just kind of beams that make a special effect. Okay. It's not really anything special. But I really like the way they went about it in this game with Goss Harag and Lunagaron, especially with just making ice weapons that they use during the fight. I think that's a really cool way to go about it, and it's a really fun fight. Lunagaron is S tier, easily for me, almost going into double S tier. Magma Almudron is another case of it's just kind of the same monster, but it looks different. Its fight isn't even all that different. It is kind of just red Almudron. I prefer the color scheme of normal Almudron. The fight's not really any different at all. I prefer the armor of normal Almudron. Yeah, and again, I mentioned this in the previous video, but Magma Almudron just kind of made me go, oh man, I really wish we had Ignactor right now. Magma Almudron isn't really a monster I like that much. It's just Almudron, but it applies fire to you now, every now and then, pretty much, with less interesting looking gear. It's just worse Almudron. Yeah, D tier for me. Magnamalo is a really cool monster. It's a really good flagship. It's a little bit over-designed in some aspects, a little bit overly spiky, but I can see what they were going for. I really like the samurai theater mask that he is going on with his face. It's a really cool aesthetic. It's a fun fight, but it's a little bit overdone for me. I really love the monster. I really love the fight. But yeah, despite me saying that, Scorned Magnamalo is going to go in S tier for me for just being a better Magnamalo. It has everything Magnamalo has, but more, and it's really cool. Also, speaking of Magnamalos, I really like purple. It's one of my favorite colors. Gore Magala is another example of that. So, of course, I really love their color scheme. Their fight's cool. Their aesthetic is really cool. It looks a little bit out of place in the world of Monster Hunter, but I can overlook that. Malzeno, the vampire monster, of course. It's a cool vampire monster. It is nowhere near Lunagaron for me, so it's a really low S tier. I'd actually maybe put him down with Astalos, but it's a high A tier. It's a really cool fight, really cool gear. I love Bloodright as a skill. I have it on all of my builds now. And I can't really complain. It's a vampire monster. Mizitsune, another of the Fated Four. Big bubble, super Japanese kitsune foxfish thing. It's a really cool fight with the slipping around on bubbles. It's a Leviathan. I like all the Leviathans. What is there to say that hasn't already been said about Mizitsune? I'm going to put Nargacuga in B tier. It's so weird seeing Rajang and Chameleos in the same tier. I feel like I want to split B into B and B2. I don't want to make F. I don't want to make anything lower than F or higher than triple S. So I'm going to actually do that. Give me a second. Okay. So I've made B plus and B minus, and this is how things went. Chameleos, Nargacuga, Almudron, the Bishatens, and Kulu-Ya-Ku are in B plus. Bazelgeuse, Arzuros, Lagambi, Diablos, and Furious Rajang are in B minus. Actually, wait, no. Furious Rajang is going to be in B plus. Yes, perfect. That's good. Next up is, wow, skipping straight to the best one, Allmother Narwa. I love the Wind and Thunder Serpents. I think they look gorgeous. I love their aesthetic. I love the way their fight goes. I love everything about them, and Allmother Narwa is just the best of them. I'm going to have to say SS tier for Allmother Narwa. It is a fantastic final boss, and I absolutely loved it. The gear is also pretty cool. I'm not a huge fan of its skills and stuff, but it's not bad. It's not bad. It's certainly up there. But the fight, the aesthetic, the theme, everything about it, the story around it going on, the fact that it uses magnetism, it's just such a cool, super aesthetic, super gorgeous, and awesome fight. Pukei Pukei is another case of a fairly low tier monster going way higher than it probably should. I just really like Pukei Pukei. It's got some of the same things going on as Kulu-Ya-Ku did, but just also being a much more fun fight. It's an iguana, which iguanas look awesome. It's a poison dragon with a long, dopey tongue and a tail that can spew poison. It's got fantastic looking gear, at least as far as the armor goes. Pukei Pukei is just one of my favorite lower mid tier monsters. It's alongside Barroth for me. Actually, that's kind of perfect. Yeah. Rachnikadaki and Pyrarachnikadaki. I absolutely love the spider monsters. I would love to see Nerscylla brought back. I realize that would mean that we would need to get Gypceros back, but also I don't think we would. We can have a subspecies of a monster without the base version, so you could bring the Khezu version back. You could just bring those monsters back without bringing the other monsters into it. You don't necessarily need to. Like I said, we have small monsters without their big monster variants in these games, so we could have we have a Tetranadon, Tetsukabra that is in the game, but we never fight a Tetsukabra. So we could have a Nerscylla brought in wearing the Khezu or Gypceros hides and not have Gypceros actually in the game. That would be possible. It's a thing that is basically something that has already happened in a few of these games, so it's not completely unprecedented and unwarranted. I think it'd be pretty cool having Nerscylla back. I also think it'd be really cool to get a subspecies of Nerscylla that just doesn't have one of those shrouds, like I don't know, shedded Nerscylla or something. But basically, this one would be faster. It'd be much more violent and aggressive, but it would have less health. Basically, is how I would think that would go. I think it'd look really cool. I would love a version of Nursilla that just didn't have a shroud. I've always thought that would be cool. But back on the Arachnokodakis. Normal Arachnokodaki is A tier for me, and Pyrarachnokodaki is also A tier for me. Because Pyrarachnokodaki and normal Arachnokodaki feel exactly the same to me, except one of them makes you explode every now and then. But it's not, like, worse in any way. So, yeah. I feel like this is just slightly better, maybe, Arachnokodaki, but the fact that we already had Arachnokodaki makes it less interesting to me. So, Rathalos, I'm going to have to put him in B+. It's a good monster. It's Old Faithful. It's a little annoying with how much he flies, but there's really not many complaints about Rathalos. It's just kind of it's him. It is the monster, which makes it perfect for him to be in the middle of the list. Rathian, as I already said, I've always preferred Rathian to Rathalos. I think its fight is more interesting. I think its aesthetic is more interesting. I think a lot of its weapons look good. Its armor looks good if you ignore the female waist. Like, replace that waist with something else or just not wear a waist. Everything else about the female armor set on Rathian looks great, except for that waist. So, yeah. I love Rathian. Again, it's another monster I farmed really early on. I was wearing full Rathian and using a Rathian weapon when I was nearing the end of high rank in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. Royal Ludroth. It's a cool sponge Leviathan. I like all the Leviathans. It's fun. I've never had a problem with Royal Ludroth. It might be a little bit low tier, but it's also a little bit of cooler design than some of the other monsters I would put lower. It's a sponge monster. It's fun. It's got fun weapons and armor, and there's really no complaints. I really like it. Seething Bazelgeuse in Sunbreak, I'm going to give an A. It is still better than normal Bazelgeuse in my opinion, but it feels a lot more like normal Bazelgeuse than World Seething Bazelgeuse did. And I also don't like the aesthetic of the way its seeds pop in this game as much as I did in World. In World, they bloomed like flowers and then exploded. In this game, they just kind of like swell up like a balloon, not even a balloon, like a turbulent blob, and then explode. Its aesthetic is much worse in this game than it was in World. Its fight feels a lot less unique to me. It's still a really cool monster. I really like it. But it's not quite as good as World Seething Bazelgeuse. If this was World Seething Bazelgeuse, I'd probably put it in S tier, like a really high S tier. Seething, I'm going to put it in A tier. It's a fun monster. It's also, in my opinion, one of the hardest monsters in Sunbreak as far as like their default versions go. And Afflicted Seething is a thing. I have a lot of trouble with this monster. But it's really cool. It's got awesome looking gear and weapons. There's not really any complaints. It was a flagship. A lot of people do seem to forget it was a flagship because it was overlooked by Gore Magala, and I don't blame that for happening. But it's always been a cool monster with some cool weapons and cool armor, and yeah, I don't really know how to go more into that. Shagaru Magala up with normal Gore Magala in triple S tier for pretty much the same reasons, but going, instead of dark purple edgy, it's bright, glowing, literally the sun himself, god guy with horns, and it looks a lot more like strong, and it knows how to use its abilities more. It's a really fun fight. It's got really fun gear. I do prefer the aesthetic of Gore Magala a little bit, but I do also really like this monster for the way it looks a lot more itself, but the gear of Gore Magala better. Silver Rathalos with normal Rathalos, because I've never really been able to distinguish the difference other than Silver Rathalos is harder. Somnacanth, a really low B+. Actually, no, I'm going to say B-. I really like Somnacanth, but it is one of the less interesting Leviathans. Of course, the aesthetic of it being a siren that sings you to sleep and then kills you is a really cool thing. And it's really got a cool head frill thing going on, but it's not anything special, which is why when you take away the whole lulls you to sleep thing, it goes down here. It's a big part of why I don't really care much about Aurora Somnacanth, because it's basically just taking the things that make Somnacanth a good monster and getting rid of them, so I don't really care about Aurora Somnacanth. Teostra, In Sunbreak, in Rise, I'm going to say A tier. I'm a little surprised I'm putting him... Actually, where did I put Chameleos? Okay. Chameleos is in B+, so I'm also going to put him in B+. Yeah. Because they're about the same for me. In World, he would be, like, down here in C. I did not like World Teostra, but in Rise, I like him a lot more. So I'm going to put him in B+, with Chameleos. Tetranadon. I absolutely love Tetranadon. I love all the amphibian monsters we've gotten so far. I love that he's a Kappa, sumo wrestler, turtle, frog, platypus thing. I love that he's a combination of all these other things, and it works fantastically. He's a great monster. He's super cute aesthetic. His gear is awesome looking. His fight is fun. I have absolutely no complaints about Tetranadon. He's an awesome monster. He is S tier for me. Normal Narwa. I'm going to say A tier. It's a little overshadowed by Allmother. If Allmother didn't exist, Normal Narwa would maybe be an S tier with Gaismogorm. But Allmother does exist, so I care slightly less about Normal Narwa. Tigrex. Where did I put Nargacuga? I'm going to put him a little bit lower. I've never been a huge fan of Tigrex. He's the least interesting one of them aesthetically. His fight, at least in the older games, was mostly annoying. I feel like it's gotten a little bit better, or maybe I've gotten used to it, but I feel like in the older games, all he did was charge back and forth, and he did absolutely nothing else. Maybe the occasional tail spin. Maybe that's just my bad luck with his fight, and other people had better experiences, but he would just do nothing but charge back and forth in the older games for me, which made the fights extremely annoying and grueling and unfun. Tobi-Kadachi. Funny story about Tobi-Kadachi. You fight him fairly on in Monster Hunter World. I forgot he existed for the longest... until Viper Tobi-Kadachi came out. You face him very early on in World. I played World pretty much when it came out. I fought him the one time you're required to fight him, and I forgot he existed until Viper Tobi-Kadachi became a thing. I legitimately forgot he existed. He's an okay monster. It's a cool snake, wolf, flying squirrel thing. It really feels from that description like it should be a lot more interesting to me than it is. I just don't know what it is about Tobi-Kadachi, but it just is very forgettable for me. Volvodon. It's another bear monster. I like the bear monsters. It's an armadillo, which is really cool. Speaking of, there was an armadillo in my front yard the other day. That was cool. We thought it was a possum at first, and then I looked closer, and I was like, no, that's an armadillo. That's a first. I've never seen one of those in person. I knew we had them around here, but I've never seen one, myself. That was pretty cool. Volvodon, big red armadillo with a long anteater tongue. It's a fun fight. It rolls around and pinballs all over the place. Its gear and weapons are cool, especially considering their paralysis. I really like paralysis stuff. Yeah, it's a great monster. B+. Ibushi. Where did I put Narwa? I put Narwa in A. I'm going to put Ibushi alongside him. Her. It's just kind of different Narwa. Not even, better or worse. Just different. Zinogre. I've always liked Zinogre. He is an S-tier monster for me. Yeah. And that's the list. You have 2 triple S's. Both of them are the Magalas. I thought there was going to be more in there. There were some things that got close to being an SS, but so far it's just Garangolm and Allmother Narwa. I'm looking over this list a little bit more. Okay, and that is it. I just went through and reorganized it a little bit. Nothing really changed tiers, but I moved them around in their tiers a bit more. Basically ordering from best to worst, right to left. Worst monster here in the tier. The further down they are, the less they are. Some of these are pretty much tied with each other, though. So basically, in B+, my favorite monster in B+, is Almudron, and my least favorite is Furious Rajang. But of course, B+ is still a good tier. B is still a good tier. C is, they're just kind of there. I don't really care too much about them. B is, I like them, but meh. B+ is, I enjoy this monster. I really like it. A is, this is a fantastic monster. S is, this is, in my top 50, probably. There's a lot of them in this game. SS is, Garangolm is in the running for triple S. I want to get that across. And Allmother Narwa, too. These 4, they're in separate tiers, but they are barely separated at all. These are all some of my favorite monsters that have been in the entire series. This is how I feel about all of the Monster Hunter Sunbreak games. I'm sorry I couldn't put into better words why or why not I like these things. This is just kind of an opinion-based tier list. Yeah. If you were bored, I'm sorry I wasted your time. If you enjoyed that for whatever reason, hit like. I would really appreciate it. And that is all for that video. Thank you, and goodbye.